Welcome. Good evening. Welcome to the November 1st, 2021 meeting of the Arlington County Planning Commission. I'm Jim Lantelmi, Chair of the Commission. This is the Planning Commission's only public hearing scheduled for this month. Tonight, we will be hearing two items. The recommended adoption of an update of the Public Art Master Plan, a subcomponent of the Public Space Master Plan, that is in turn one of the 11 elements of the county's comprehensive plan. Our second item is various changes to the Columbia Pike form-based code to allow additional ground floor uses. We will also be hearing our committee reports and have some other business. I also note that tonight we welcome a number of University of Mary Washington students. Nick Rogers, one of the staff of CPHD, principal planner, also teaches an introduction to planning course there, and his students are attending along with everybody else virtually, so I welcome them here tonight. Some other items I'm required to share now. For the safety of our staff and residents, we're holding this meeting virtually. Welcome to our commissioners, county staff, applicants, community members who are all joining us remotely. We are legally authorized to hold this virtual meeting based on the county board direction. Before we begin, I have a few specifics to orient everyone to our virtual environment. Tonight's meeting is available as a broadcast with closed captioning on Comcast Xfinity channels 25 and 1085, Verizon Fios channels 39 and 40, and the county's website. Audio of tonight's meeting is available via phone. If commissioners, presenters, or speakers lose internet connectivity during the meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. You can use the number provided in the Teams invite, 347-973-6905, with that conference ID of 815-544-372#. And excuse me. For other presenters and speakers joining us through Microsoft Teams, please keep your phones and devices muted until you're called upon. Please turn off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. And when you're called upon to speak, you are the one who must clicking on the microphone icon that's located on your meeting's command bar. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you. If you're dialing in by phone, press *6 to unmute. Commissioners, you know the drill. If you wish to be recognized to speak, use your hand raise function or turn on your video and unmute your microphone to signal your interest. I'll call upon people in order. The meeting chat is active for presenters or commissioners who need technical assistance only. Do not use the meeting chat for discussion, public comments, questions about the agenda items, or requests for more information. All comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public testimony period. By the way, we do not have any registered public speakers tonight. Finally, this is a public forum. Tonight's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county's website. All information associated with tonight's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act requirements. Madam Clerk, please call tonight's first item.
Thank you. Our first item is the adoption of an update to the Public Art Master Plan, a sub-element of Arlington County's comprehensive plan. We have Elizabeth Carragher and Angela Adams to present this item to us this evening.
Welcome, Ms. Carragher and Ms. Adams. Go ahead and make your presentation.
Good evening. Thank you for having us back this evening and for the adoption phase of the Public Art Master Plan update. Over the next several minutes, Elizabeth and I will go over key aspects of the master plan development process. First, I would like to share some foundational information, starting with our definition of public art. For us, public art is the intentional involvement of artists in places and spaces where sufficient resources, the time, energy, and money, are allocated and where community is engaged. This slide outlines important milestones for the public art program. 21 years ago, the county board first adopted a public art policy. 4 years later, the board adopted the county's first public art master plan. The following year, the county manager approved the program's first set of guidelines, which were then updated 10 years later in 2015. 10 years ago, the Public Art Program, a unit of Arlington Cultural Affairs, moved from the Parks Department to Arlington Economic Development. Having begun the master plan update process over 4 years ago, we hope to see it adopted this month. This slide highlights the success of the initial Public Art Master Plan, which we feel has been very successful. Our metrics are based on the number of county projects as well as site plan projects and contributions to the Public Art Fund that have occurred since the original PAMP's adoption. The American Planning Association commended the county and our plan for using public art for promoting design excellence and a high-quality public realm. And finally, the PAMP is often used as a model for other public art programs, and our advice is frequently sought by other cities developing public art master plans. Public art has been part of Arlington's landscape for more than 40 years, when the county, a citizen activist, an artist, a developer, and the National Endowment for the Arts joined to create Dark Star Park, a seminal landscape artwork created by Nancy Holt in Roslyn. This is an image from the popular Dark Star Park Day shadow alignment, which takes place on August the 1st at approximately 9:32 a.m. and attracts large crowds each year. Since the 1970s, the county and private developers have completed more than 100 permanent and temporary artworks in Arlington. Community support and peer recognition have validated the county's investment in public art and the approaches the program has followed. For a bit of fun, the master plan update includes an interactive timeline and map of all the projects the program has completed to date. We started the update process in 2017 with an intense phase of research, followed by robust community engagement at all levels, including steering committees, a widely distributed questionnaire, and public open houses. For something a little bit different, we developed 2 artist-led community engagement activities. Bookmaking with Sushmita Mazumdar that resulted in the creation of 250 handmade books related to our public art collection, and county wandering walking tours with Graham Carell Allen that took place in locations across the county. Officially, the Public Art Master Plan is part of Arlington's comprehensive plan, which guides the coordinated development of the county. Technically, the Public Art Master Plan is a sub-element of the Public Spaces Master Plan, which was recently updated. That means our plan will be consulted as future planning efforts are undertaken and as the county makes investments in facilities and infrastructure and developers propose site plan projects. We also made sure that the vision and values of the master plan are consistent with enriching lives, Arlington's Arts and Culture Strategy, the Arts Commission's strategic plan recently adopted by the county board. Finally, our plan will be supported by the public art policy, program guidelines, and a brand new implementation guide that will outline how the priorities in the Public Art Master Plan can be translated into actions through partnerships with county agencies and other collaborators. It has now been more than 17 years since the county's first public art plan was approved. This update was initiated to make sure the program is taking into consideration the changes in the context that have occurred since then, and to reground the program in the values around which it was organized in the first place. We also seek to reflect new opportunities and practices, as well as changing county policies and priorities. A number of changes were made in the plan update to address how both the field of public art and the county have evolved since 2004. There is new emphasis on equity, audience development and engagement, biophilia, creative placemaking, social practice, and artist residencies. There are 2 new priority corridors, Langston Boulevard and Potomac Riverfront, and 2 new themes, Innovative Arlington and Sustainable Arlington. Action and administrative items have been separated out into an implementation guide. Here, in a nutshell, is what you'll see in the master plan update. The big picture, the vision, values, and principles, goals that underline Arlington's approach to public art. The context, what is happening in the county and what is happening in the field of public art that informs our program's approach. Program areas, what are the types of work that the program does? Priorities, where does the program focus its efforts? Regarding our vision, Arlington's public art program is noteworthy among programs in the field because of our early and unwavering commitment to bringing curatorial thinking to how public spaces and public facilities are designed and activated. It's a big idea that places the program squarely within the fundamental conversations supporting the development of Arlington's public realm and puts us in constant dialogue with other county departments, private developers, and partnership organizations. These values focus on the practice of public art. They are all different ways of saying whatever opportunities we are focusing on, that artistic vision and integrity are paramount, and collaboration and engagement are critical to the integrity of public art projects. We have added a new value related to equity because of the central importance of that topic today. Here we seek to recognize the importance of everyone's creative and civic voice and the importance of all residents to be able to benefit from the community's resources. These principles are something of a checklist for how the program develops projects and interacts with other county agencies as well as with developers. They emphasize collaboration and integration with county planning and development processes. They also stress that outcomes should not only be aesthetic, they should make a meaningful difference in how people experience and relate to public spaces. This last principle, make public art accessible, engaging, and enriching, is new and represents one of the ways the plan reflects our value of equity by stressing the importance of public art as a tool for people in accessing the broader cultural and economic benefits of the community. Of these goals, the first two are traditional foundations of the program. The last two reflect changes in the field, particularly in regard to drawing on innovative ways that civically and socially engaged public art is being practiced. This includes focusing on how the program continually reaches out to community members to engage them with public art resources. A lot has changed in the past 17 years. There has been an expansion of interest in public art, which brings new opportunities for partnerships. At the same time, county priorities have evolved to include issues like sustainability, affordable housing, and equity, creating new demands for county resources, but also offering new opportunities for the program to connect to what the community cares about. New directions in public art are influenced by changing priorities nationally, regionally, and in the field of public art itself. Equity appears as a strong thread throughout the plan as we seek to increase diversity, access, and inclusion, focusing on how public art can be distributed more widely in Arlington, diversifying the range of artists who are involved in projects, and expanding community participation to new audiences. Biophilia. In 2020, the county was accepted into the International Biophilic Cities Network, which is dedicated to improving the connection between residents and urban nature. The plan emphasizes encouraging artists to engage with biophilic principles and explore the use of sustainable materials in their work. In particular, the public art program is embracing two new approaches, creative placemaking and social practice. These involve place-based community engagement and focus particularly on how artists can help bring increased awareness to issues and opportunities. In Arlington, creative placemaking has been embraced by a variety of entities as a tool for engaging artists to advance the goal of enriching the public realm. In social practice projects, community-based processes are the core of the artistic approach. Recently, the program has worked on collaborative projects that explore the history of race and immigration in the county. For the past 2 years, Printer Amos Kennedy, as artist in residence, has created free prints that explore the unique history of desegregation in Arlington. I will now turn it over to Elizabeth, who will take us through the second part of the PAMP update.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you, commissioners, for having us here this evening. Arlington's public art program has thrived because it has had a clear vision and the ability to work flexibly with many partners within county government and the broader community. Looking forward, the program will continue with its vision and maintain its entrepreneurial approach while prioritizing the following types of work. Two of these, public art and civic design and developer projects, have been the traditional backbone of Arlington's public art program. Newer directions include special projects, which means creative collaborations such as artist in residencies with other county agencies or community partners. Community-initiated projects, whether stemming from individual artists or community groups, are another category we seek to encourage going forward. The update also calls out audience development and engagement as a separate category. It's important not only to commission new work, but also find ways to keep existing artworks fresh in people's minds. I'll speak to some of these areas in greater details in the next few slides. As already mentioned, developer projects are a programmatic priority for public art in Arlington and enable artists to shape public aspects of private development projects. The plan outlines a number of goals for developer projects that focus on providing long-term, integrated enhancements to Arlington's pedestrian public realm while maintaining flexibility. The plan includes a new focus on affordable housing developments. It recommends maintaining the inclusion of affordable housing developments in the public art policy, but encourages flexibility and provision of public art benefits with a focus on direct access to public art for residents. One example of this is an affordable housing artist in residency program, where an artist would work with residents and develop a concept for a permanent public artwork that would be installed at the site. We also wanted to point out that we removed the new recommendation about redirecting up to 10% of non-affordable housing contributions earmarked for use in specific areas to areas of the county where developer resources aren't usually available. And we'll discuss why towards the end of the presentation. The goals for public art and corridors are to integrate with broader planning and public realm efforts, to highlight urban and environmental systems, and activate and interpret artworks that already exist. One important goal to point out is assemble public and private resources into planned, curated, and impactful experiences. This is highly ambitious and challenging, but it's what distinguishes Arlington's work. For the past 17 years, the primary focus of public art and corridors has been the Roslyn-Ballston, Richmond Highway, and Columbia Pike corridors, where development and infrastructure investment have been focused, as well as Natural Corridor 4 Mile Run. In that way, the plan was building on the county's land use planning and capital investment priorities. This update adds 2 new corridors that are an emerging focus for planning, private investment, and public amenities, Langston Boulevard and the Potomac River. The plan identifies 5 themes that are reflective of Arlington's character and could set the stage for partnerships and for artist exploration. The 2004 plan identified themes related to the county's history, its unique connection with the federal government, and its international connections. This plan adds 2 more themes, sustainability and innovation, drawn from the county's focus on these environmental and economic development priorities. After the master plan is adopted, we will begin work on 2 other documents that are important for managing the program. We will update the county's public art policy, which was originally adopted 21 years ago. And we will begin work on an implementation guide previously noted by Angela, which is intended to be a companion piece to the public art master plan and will be reviewed and recommended for approval by the Arts Commission's Public Art Committee to the county manager. Since the October 4th Planning Commission meeting, we've given a presentation on the plan to the County Strategic Development Group and conducted board briefings with all board members. Comments that have been addressed over the past month include making the changes since the 2004 PAMP clearer. We addressed this with minor adjustments to the executive summary. As previously noted, we were asked to remove the developer goal about allocating up to 10% of public art fund contributions to projects in areas of the county where developer resources aren't usually available. We received direction from the county attorney's office that unless Arlington is granted specific authority from the state, it is not legally advisable to move community benefit funds negotiated to mitigate adverse effects in individual site plans beyond the general area of that site plan. While we believe that the idea of identifying funding for public art in areas where developer resources aren't usually available is still a good one, we recommend that the specific details to support this be addressed in the public art policy, which will need to be updated post-PAMP adoption. The issue of flexibility and provision of public art benefits for affordable housing developments was also raised by the county attorney's office, but it was deemed appropriate to remain in the plan because it does not involve setting aside funds from one area to use in another area. We are advised to remove National Landing references when not referring to the bid because the Richmond Highway corridor is not coterminous with National Landing, which spans portions of Arlington and Alexandria. And we were asked to be mindful of not wanting to sound like we were promoting cultural appropriation. So we updated text under the Global Arlington theme to provide clarity. This slide highlights main points of discussion from the October 4th Planning Commission meeting. A big topic of discussion, of course, was the issue of public art fund contributions benefiting areas of the county where developer resources are not usually available. While this has been removed from the plan, the discussion at the meeting around these funds for permanent or temporary projects was still a valuable one, and staff prefers flexibility and sees temporary projects as valuable for their ability to diversify artists and themes. There was discussion around being thoughtful and intentional in working with a diverse selection of artists. The program was also encouraged to track data on project applicants. The program is committed to encouraging greater diversification of the applicant pool and will consider strategies for tracking data on applicants. Movable and accessible public art was discussed. The program has executed successful movable projects in the past and will look for opportunities for more such accessible projects. And that ends our presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Adams and Ms. Carragher. Appreciate your presentation. Second time in a month, and it's still good. We do not have any public speakers tonight, as I mentioned before. Do we have any other commissions that would like to make a statement? We did get some written comments last month. Just a reminder, the Transportation Commission heard this at its September 30th meeting and voted unanimously to approve it. So hearing no other commissions, Commissioner Morton, do you have an update for us?
Yes, thank you, Chair Schroll. I have a brief update. Thank you to Ms. Adams and Ms. Carragher. As you know, we just discussed this last month when we were considering the RTA, and several issues were identified that staff has repeated, so I won't go over them again. And there is a more detailed discussion of some of the other changes in the Appendix 3, the document that was submitted. So my intent is going to be to recommend the county manager's recommended motion. I have a few issues that I thought might be worth discussing if my colleagues were interested, and I'll outline them now. I was interested, given the language about the 10% of the funds that were intended to go to communities traditionally not served being struck, if staff has had an opportunity to think about what other kinds of approaches might ensure that all communities are benefiting from public art. So that's one question. Another question is this concept of civic design that's been put forward in the plan. I'm interested in, from the staff or my colleagues' point of view, how can we really encourage interdisciplinarity between different agencies to take advantage of the public art civic design vision? Third question is, I'm interested if you can give a brief overview of the implementation guide and how that might integrate with Planning Commission processes. And then the fourth issue that might be worth discussing, since we have had a question about it, is the topic of on-site public art contributions versus the contributions to the pool. So that's my suggested topics.
Very good. Thank you very much, Commissioner Morton. This is now before the commission. So we already have Commissioner Steinberger with her hand raised. So why don't you lead us?
Well, I didn't know if I had a couple questions. I'm not sure if they specifically fit into one of the topics as Commissioner Morton had laid them out. So I didn't know if you still wanted other topics.
If you have another topic, certainly add it.
Okay, I wanted to talk a bit about the community initiated projects and how that would work. I'm not sure what greater umbrella that might fit under, but I had a question regarding that. And then a little bit maybe with the biophilia as well, and maybe that was already in one of Commissioner Morton's topics.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Steinberger.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any other items they would like to add? I know I would like to talk a little bit about or raise the difference between permanent and temporary art installations. Okay, why don't we lead off with the first of all, does anybody have clarifying questions they'd like to ask the presenters or other questions? Okay, well, why don't we then lead off with the 10% of funds that we know we cannot allocate funds to other areas. They have to be in the same area according to the county attorney. Is there any ideas that we could do? Otherwise, I open it up to the floor. Anybody have any further comments or questions on that question? Yes, Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you very much, Ms. Adams and Ms. Carringer, for your presentation. I just wanted to make sure I understood that this plan cannot specify 10% of funds would go to areas that may need it more, but there may be other mechanisms to achieve that goal. Is that kind of what we're saying? So that ultimately we will be able to, like, do you feel like you do have those mechanisms already established, or you're going to be in the process of looking for them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the best answer to your question is that funding for public art is best addressed in the public art policy. And the policy is now 21 years out of date, or 21 years old and several years out of date. So I think that the time to discuss how best to fund areas that aren't currently and aren't able to be the beneficiaries of site plan funded artwork would be when the county board takes up the public art policy update.
Okay, thank you. And I also wanted to make a point to Chair Lantelmi that, or maybe our future chair, whoever that may be, where Commissioner Ware wants to listen up. When we are asked by the county for what issues we may want to speak with Richmond about for giving Arlington more flexibility and rights in our local jurisdiction, this could be something that we identify in our letter to the county board to go to Richmond about. So thank you.
Great. Keep that in mind, Commissioner Peterson, because the call will come out next year for topics that we would recommend. So keep that in mind. That's a good idea. Commissioner Hughes, you're up next.
Thanks, Commissioner Lantelmi. This is, let me fix it. I guess this when I, say that we have no teeth in our language and getting 10%, to the areas is probably not going to happen. Is it we get none, and that's fine. But I am curious from staff. So the policy tool, we've just heard the county attorney's opinion is that we're lacking a legislative change, which, so I grew up in the rest of the Commonwealth, is probably less than likely. What will our policy tools be to increase the availability of permanent public art in areas where it's currently identified as underserved in such a way other than county general funds?
Well, I mean, I'll just be the first maybe to say that county general funds are currently, or not general funds, but CIP funds are what's currently noted in our public art policy as a way to fund public art. I don't know that that's been carried out consistently over the last 21 years, but that is currently in the policy as a mechanism for funding public art. The other ways in which we have and will continue to fund public art is through grant writing and through collaborations with other agencies. For instance, and this also relates to the community initiated question, we worked with the Langston Boulevard Alliance and the Spanish Embassy to fund a mural along Langston Boulevard because we had the opportunity, a way to kind of arrange this connection between a visiting artist and funding that came with that. So with the Langston Alliance, Langston Boulevard Alliance, that had expressed interest in commissioning murals. So we will continue to look for these types of collaborative opportunities where we pool resources to make projects happen.
Understood. I just think for my fellow commissioners, it's yet another example of we see so many projects and we get to deal with all the issues. And it's such another example of the county has to remember that when it prioritizes developer contributions in certain areas, it has to make up the delta for the other contributions that are lacking in those areas. And so it's not really an issue to the art per se, but it's a more general comment that is one that we should all take note of, to see that if we rely exclusively on the developers to contribute, we will get certain the benefits that the developers want in the given area. And we have to be very careful about that across our entire community. If not, we'll disproportionately invest in certain types of things across each area differently. Commissioner, tell me I'll be quiet for the rest of the evening until we vote.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. Commissioner Sarli. You're on mute. Commissioner Sarli, you're up. You're on mute. I guess he has stepped away for a moment. We can come back if he rejoins. We can move on to the second question, which is the civic design question, and how we, and Commissioner Morton, definitely correct me if I get it wrong, how we encourage sort of an interdisciplinary look between the various departments on how we approach design.
Yes, maybe if you can bear with me, maybe I should clarify that.
Okay.
We've seen a lot in public art that a lot of the key to really impactful civic design projects is kind of willingness to collaborate, the ability and interest to collaborate. And I'm wondering what maybe staff could point to as really successful collaborations and ways that perhaps collaboration could be enhanced, or things you're looking forward to in the future. Thanks.
Okay. Do we have any responses, or do we have any further comments from other commissioners? Hearing nothing, let's move on to the third item. And so I don't garble it, Commissioner Morton, would you willing to go through your third question or topic?
Sure. My third topic was I know there's a lot to come in the implementation guide, and you talk about how it will further elaborate the ways that the plan will interact with various county processes. I wonder if you could give us a few highlights or suggestions about how specifically planning commission processes will be affected by the implementation guide.
So sort of in answer to your previous question, which didn't really get further elaborated upon, and in answer to this question, I would say that the plan calls for a closer association of public art with the PFRC, the Public Facilities Review Committee. And I think this is a very, very good opportunity for staff and commissions and citizens to collaborate more closely in integrating public art in an interdisciplinary fashion. In terms of further recommendations in the implementation plan, I don't know, Elizabeth, if anything pops out for you. But the only other thing I'll say is that we have this idea of civic visioning, which is a way of engaging artists and engaging communities to imagine a particular topic in a different way. We've put this, of course, into practice in terms of our own engagement for this plan update. But this is something that I think would enable further interdisciplinary thinking as it relates to new projects. Is there anything, Elizabeth, that you might want to add?
Yeah, so the matrix also includes I would call it a process timeline for how we do projects, starting at the very beginning phases, taking it through the entire chain. So I think that's very helpful. And then it includes a matrix of potential projects that we will be tracking closely, keeping that updated as things change. I think, that's one of the reasons why that part of that companion piece will be approved by the manager. So it's something that we can keep updated and we can track projects. I think that's going to be very helpful for the departments we collaborate with, as well as the Planning Commission. And that was included in the 2004 plan, but as mentioned, it's separated out into this implementation guide.
Let me jump in here. I actually do have a follow-up question on this. You mentioned the PFRC, and I chaired the PFRC for a while, and one of the projects that we had was Fire Station 8, and you probably remember that had a very, very important art component to it to make sure that the architecture and the rebuilding of that station honored its history for the African American community in that part of the county. In what you're looking at, would we have done that in some different way, or what would it be different if it was being done under what you're recommending? We felt it was a pretty successful process there, which we think is coming up with a pretty high quality and very functional fire station that will in fact be honoring its interesting history. So what do you think could be or should be have been done differently, if anything?
I don't know that anything could or should have been done differently. I think public art is a tool in the civic design toolbox. There are a lot of ways at getting at enhancements in projects. Architects, landscape architects, designers of other sorts, folks who are creating monuments to historic moments in our history. Those are all different approaches to enhancing a facility. I think that were there to be a more coordinated effort with planning for public art in civic facilities in preparation for PFRC review, perhaps public art would be considered earlier in the process. But again, there are many, many ways at getting enhancement in civic projects.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments on this topic? Okay, Commissioner Morton, could you get on to your fourth question? Commissioner Steinberger.
I was just slow on the hand and the mute and the thing. I just clicked on something. Sorry, technical difficulties. No, I was going to say that as the current chair of the PFRC, I would welcome the opportunity to have kind of a closer working relationship and really the opportunity to bring in the conversation about public art and what that would entail at an earlier point. And I think that's a very positive direction to move in. So it was a comment, not a question, but anyway, thank you.
Okay, well, no, thank you. Good comment. Commissioner Morton.
Thank you, Chair Lantelmi. I just wanted to raise the issue, since it's come up from time to time in the past, of the concept of it within the site plan process, in particular, the on-site contribution versus contribution to a pool of funds to be used either to collect, to do a larger project, or to shift around in the area a bit. So I wondered if, again, I think you've probably done this several times, but if you could explain the position of the PAMP right now and why that's what's being put forward.
Yeah, I think one of the things we hear repeatedly when we speak with the development community is the desire for flexibility. So I'll remind you that our program started with asking developers to create works of public art as a community benefit. And what we found in implementing this over the years was that not every developer was interested or able in doing this. So we felt that to create an option where a in lieu cash contribution could be made was providing additional flexibility to the development community. And we have, of course, the master plan guiding us in how this money will be directed and used. So they are projects within the plan and within the area of where the site plan contribution was received.
Do we have a definition of what the area is? Is it, feet, yards, miles, blocks, defined neighborhood association?
We have metro area generally for projects along the RB corridor and along the Richmond Highway corridor. So you could use the quarter-mile radius. I think in some areas they're combined because of the paucity of contributions in one area perhaps. But for the most part, we try to use them within that quarter-mile radius, which is our understanding of the planning definition of the metro area.
Okay, great. No, that's good. Good, thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Commissioner Bagley.
Thank you, Chair Lantelmi. I just have a curious question. As a former Civic Association president for Ballston, Virginia Square, when site plans would come in and want the on-site contribution, and maybe this has changed, or maybe you don't think it should change. I'm curious how you think about this. There was no coordination that we could see as citizens about what public art would be, or how it would be, or anything like that. And I'm thinking about one site plan in particular that brought in a piece of very interactive art, which the owner went on to sell that property to another owner. And in the span of that, the interactive art piece, something was happening with it where it was starting to sound like something out of Psycho, where, residents were complaining that it had Halloween eerie sounds and things. So I contacted the initial developer who gave me the name of this particular piece, and I handed it off to the more recent owner. And what happened was they actually put zip ties on it to stop it. Which you kind of wonder, and I'm sure there's a artistic side of zip ties, but I'm not sure that, in the grand scheme of things, that public art is achieved there. And I'm just curious as where you all sit and the efforts that you're trying to make. Is there some way where, yes, the developer can do on-site, or they can do the funds, whatever? Is there some hey, can we collaborate, or is there some way more so that you can get involved in that? And then what happens if the art turns out to be, like in this case, not so artistic? What is the recourse, or is there any, or should that be something thought about? I'm just curious about it because it had come up in my civic association. Thank you.
I think it's an excellent question. And I will say that public art that is commissioned through the site plan process follows a very detailed process, which is outlined in the standard condition for public art, where we have at least a two-step process of the developer presenting the artist and then the concept to the public art committee. Those are public meetings open to everyone. We then the staff provide resource to the developer and their consultant to make sure that the artwork that's selected is appropriate for the site. The artist who is commissioned is capable of producing the work that they've conceived of, and that there's a maintenance plan for the future. I think I'm aware of the project of which you're speaking of. And it was a shame. I noticed the same thing, that it had been taken out of service. And it's actually a piece by a fairly well-known artist. If I'm not mistaken, they had a commission with a recent Olympic game for the Olympic Games. And so I'm not exactly sure what more could have been done or might be done. But I will say that for any piece of public art, or anything that someone would deem sculpture in the public environment, even if it technically doesn't fall under our purview, if we haven't directly commissioned it as the county, if we haven't assisted a community entity in creating it, and if we haven't guided it through our site plan process for commissioning artwork, we are still here as professionals, as folks who can provide technical assistance to anyone that has any question about any public sculpture. We have often stepped up to help guide and preserve and maintain works of art that are orphans in the community. So we may not have purview to do it ourselves and to fund it ourselves, but we can provide advocacy and we can provide professional guidance as to how to go about it.
Well, thank you, Ms. Adams. So if you are thinking of the same one that I'm referring to, since it's no longer functioning, is there something that can be done? And how do we make sure that this doesn't happen in the future, I guess is also a concern, because it came up as a great idea. And when I found out specifically more information about it, because there wasn't a whole lot in the SPRC process, it was an impressive piece, but it's not impressive anymore. And it's just kind of out there now. So what if anything can be done now, and how do we prevent this in the future? Do we take a stronger stand? Do we push maintenance further? I'm just curious about that. I would not want to see that happen again.
Well, the first thing I'll say is that we have nor would we want to restrict a private entity from commissioning a work of art for their property. This goes for homeowners, businesses, developers. We do see from time to time where a developer will opt to make the cash in lieu contribution, not choose to go through our process, and still commission a work of public art for their site. So I believe that this has happened in the location you're referencing and in several others. Because there is no public benefit there's no quid pro quo. This is not part of their benefits package. We don't really have the authority to step in and say this piece is no longer functioning as intended, as promised, and therefore it's a site plan violation. In cases where the project has come through the commissioning process, we have that teeth. We have certainly done that. If a piece is not functioning, is no longer being maintained, we can work with zoning to and with the planning folks to make sure that this is called to the attention of the folks who enforce site plan conditions. So unfortunately, this was done outside of that. I'm not sure what else to do other than we're available for a conversation with the current owners to see what might be done in this case.
So one last thing. So then moving forward, would it be fair to say that when there is a developer that is suggesting this magnificent public art contribution that they're getting, and it's really special, a gateway to the neighborhood, et cetera, would, and not seeming as though there was sort of any input, whereas, not necessarily citizens would have the artistic ability to have artistic input other than things they like. Would there be, or can it be, or would you prefer, or do you not want to be involved at all in a point of that process where, just reminding you that, they're out there to help and work with you or whatever? I'm just not sure. I'm feeling as though it just seems as we're pushing forward to get more public art out there, that all aspects of it have to be looked at, or that, I'm just wanting to make sure that, we try to avoid this happening in the future. And there must be some sort of happy medium where you can be available, not, give an edict or something, but make it so that there's a little bit more than, hey guys, this is what we're going to put out there, and maybe not tied into benefits, but because it's the gateway to the this and the that, softening what otherwise residents were very fearful of, the other changes they were talking about, and the thing not working. So I just think that there should be more, not necessarily teeth, but perhaps guidance from your group in situations even like that. And then maybe this wouldn't happen. Thank you.
I actually remember a conversation with Penrose, the developer for the project I believe you're referencing, and we were told in a pre-filing meeting, or actually sometime maybe even post-entitlement, that they were going to go ahead and commission a work themselves. And I think we had tried to figure out a way to work with them to have them come through our process. And they said that they were pretty committed to doing it the way that they were going to do it. And I believe we said, we are here as a resource, so please let us know if you need anything. And then similarly, the carpool site, 4000 Fairfax Drive, similarly decided to commission a work of art outside of our purview. And we actually reviewed it as part of the landscape plan. So working with our colleague Chris Kreider and Brett Wallace, when they are in a position to review elevations and landscape plans, we often get called into that and can make recommendations, and did in this case for lighting. And I actually got a note, it was really very heartening. I got a note from the artist the other day who had finally figured out how to light that piece, and he asked me what I thought. So, and we said we were thrilled that they took our advice and they came up with a really professional lighting plan. So I will say it does happen, and we do attempt to insinuate ourselves as graciously as possible to make ourselves available both to citizens and developers as these situations arise.
Thank you. So, Chair Lindhelm, I would like to see some perhaps stronger endorsement of their services or influence in future, site plan developments where the developer comes in and they have their heart set on X, Y, or Z. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Isabel Stark, did you want to add something to staff comments? Your hand is up.
Yes, I did. Thank you. I just wanted to add, and thank you, Commissioner Bagley, for bringing that up. First, I wanted to make sure that the piece you were talking about was developed outside of the guidance from staff, and I see that that was correct. And I also wanted to point out, and thank you for bringing that up, because I just want to say that our staff, public art staff, is exemplary. They are there as a resource. They work so well with many developers and have received kudos from many of them. And we would love to have them work as a resource with anyone who's interested in public art. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments along this topic? Seeing none, I'd like to jump in. I do actually have a question about, and this did come up a month ago, the difference between the temporary art and the permanent installations. And correct me if I'm wrong, because the impression I got was you would see something like, of course, Dark Star Park or the high-heeled bench at the Hyatt Hotel, which was done as part of the site plan, as permanent installations, whereas a mural would be seen more as a temporary installation. When I see temporary and permanent, I don't see the distinction. I see it permanent as something that is there and is intended to be there as long as the building exists, or for an indefinite period, whereas something temporary is a time limited, that it's an installation that will be here for the next 6 months, let's say, and then will be dismantled and removed. Or it's going to be decorating a building that will be torn down in 3 months. So it's sort of an interim thing. So, I see temporary as literally as it has a finite life and will be removed. The intent is to remove it at some point in the future, whereas permanent is something that has no intended lifespan beyond just continuing on, because a mural can, of course, fade, but it can also be touched up. And even something concrete like Dark Star Park still needs maintenance to make sure the concrete doesn't spoil and that the weeds don't overgrow on the ground part and cover up where the lines are, where the shadows would go. So, I'm having difficulty in how you're characterizing permanent and temporary is really what I'm saying.
Really an excellent question, because murals are treated as more long-term projects in many communities. So perhaps a better distinction would be projects that come after the fact, and the fact being this process for actually planning the facility. So we are currently directed per our policy to focus on an integrated approach to public art. So the two examples you provided, Dark Star Park and the bench at the Hyatt Hotel, were created as those two facilities were being created. So in the case of Dark Star Park, it was a park that was planned and developed, it was planned and designed by an artist, Nancy Holt. And in the case of the Hyatt Hotel, they had decided, working with the community, that the corner needed enhancement, and they wanted to provide a functional enhancement. So it was an artist design bench that got created, but it was created as part of the design of that entire facade and that entire architectural effort. So murals come after the fact. They come as buildings are planned for demolition, like the recent project on the back of the old COSI as part of the landmark site. That was created by JBG Smith many years ago, when that project was expected to come down soon, to make it a more attractive site while they were waiting for the project to begin. So that's a classic point in time when a mural comes. Murals are also often done by communities who don't have a lot of resources, who are feeling like they want something to enhance a particular location, and nothing's going to change at that location. So if you look at the 3 recent mural projects along Lee Highway, those are great examples of where we've done murals that will probably have a long life in situations that are not slated to change anytime soon. But they've come after the fact, after those buildings were built. So perhaps it's helpful to look at murals in that way. We classify them as temporary, but maybe it's more useful to think of something that's planned in an integrated fashion versus something that comes after a project is completed.
That's a great explanation, but I would strongly urge you to get rid of the permanent and temporary, because it just confuses people, and it makes some communities feel like this is something ephemeral. It's almost disrespectful. And I know that you had no intent of that whatsoever, but the terminology doesn't really work for your explanation. The explanation is great, and that makes perfect sense. But use a different term for the two, distinguishing between the two, because the way you explained it, I get, and that makes really good sense. So try to find other terms to use this. Commissioner Steinberger.
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate my support for your the comment of the chair. I think that is a worthwhile distinction, but agree that there is maybe a better way to indicate that than temporary versus permanent, which I think conjures up a different understanding in my mind and quite likely in the minds of many others versus what it is that you were able to kind of explain in this context. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments on this or any other topic regarding the Public Art Master Plan? Yeah, Commissioner Steinberger.
So I had not asked my question. I guess I got lost in the topics as they were going, but I did want to talk about the community initiated projects. Could you speak a little bit more about that process and if a community is able to get funding, what guidance that the county would sort of be providing in that? And if you have any examples of that, I would appreciate that as well.
Yeah, I think there are a number of examples that we can point to. I'm sometimes, especially in situations like these, I develop anomia and I can't think of the name of an artist or a work of art. So Elizabeth, chime in if you can help me here. But there's a project across from the My Organic Market on Langston Boulevard that was commissioned by the residents of the condo association that's immediately adjacent. And the way that was funded was through an Arts Commission grant. So we will often direct interested parties who are looking for funding to find an Arlington artist who can then apply for a grant. That is one way that we support these projects, and that's one example of where we writ large in this case with cultural affairs, not just the public art program, but the Arts Commission's grants program helped to support that.
That was
in the case. Thank you, Kate Fleming. Ooh, I knew the Kate, but I didn't want to grope for the Fleming, so thank you. And in addition, other projects along Langston Boulevard, which are the easiest for me to point out because they're recent and they're completed, and hopefully they're somewhat familiar to you all. There were 3 cases where we helped the Langston Boulevard Alliance connect with an artist and connect with a patron, someone to provide the space for the art. So in some cases, in the case of the David DeLamano project, that's on the side of KH Framing at the corner of Langston Boulevard and Glebe Road, that was one where we had the artist, we had the funding in part from the Spanish embassy, and we needed a wall. So that came in that fashion through the Langston Boulevard Alliance connections with their business community. In the case of the one that followed on its heels at the Cowboy Cafe, the proprietor of the Cowboy Cafe had seen a project that Arlington Arts had done during the pandemic that it featured Maz Paz, who is an Arlington artist, and they wanted Maz to reproduce the drawing that he had done as part of this other project. And so we worked with helping to connect those dots and making that project happen. And last I saw when driving by, they were expanding it. So it was so popular that the proprietor, the patron in this case, decided to fund more of this. And then most recently, we were asked by the Langston Boulevard Alliance to help find an African-American muralist who had experience doing murals. And Elizabeth put together research that spanned from Southern Virginia all the way to Philadelphia, which has a very robust public art program, mural program. And we provided a list of possible artists. and the Alliance selected one, and we helped them make a case to Sport Fair to sponsor the mural on that wall. So, we work in different ways. In that case, we helped to fund the project through a sponsorship of the overall project that took place, basically celebrating the change in the name of the boulevard. So vastly different examples, but hopefully that gives you a sense of the array of how we participate in helping communities achieve their vision for public art.
Oh, that did. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Steinberger. Do we have any other questions or comments? Going once, twice. Okay. Commissioner Morton, do you have a motion for us?
I do. Thank you, Chair Lantelmi. I do also want to thank all of the commissions and individuals who have labored so hard thus far. It's been a really long haul for all of the hard work. And I'm looking forward to seeing this when it's finally adopted. And I'd like to move that the Planning Commission recommend that the County Board adopt the attached resolution, which was attachment 1 for us, to update the Public Art Master Plan as is showed in attachment 2 with the revisions that are outlined in attachment 3.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Weir, thank you. Okay, do we have any further comment? Do you want to speak to your motion? Do we have any other comments? Okay, hearing none, I will move to the vote. Commissioner Weir.
Aye.
Commissioner Schroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes.
Aye.
Commissioner Garrett.
Aye.
Commissioner Morton.
Aye.
Commissioner Steinberger.
Aye.
Commissioner Patel. Commissioner Patel, you're on mute.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson.
Aye.
Commissioner Bagley.
Aye.
Commissioner Sarli.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. The motion passes unanimously. Ms. Carragher and Ms. Adams, thank you very much for your time and your presentations, and good luck before the county board.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And Madam Clerk, could you please call the second item?
Item number 2 is ZOA-2021-03, FBC-25, and N-FBC-12. This is an ordinance to amend, reenact, and recodify multiple zoning ordinance articles and sections. We have Ebony Dumas to present this item from the Planning Division.
Thank you, Ms. Dumas. It's your turn.
Awesome. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Ebony Dumas, and I'm an associate planner with CPHD's comprehensive planning team, and I'm also the project manager for this study. Today, I will give a brief overview of the Columbia Pike Form-Based Code Ground Story Uses Table Study and the resulting recommendations. We'll also take a few minutes to highlight some results from our ongoing community engagement efforts and the more recent discussions that have continued to evolve since this item was heard as a request to advertise last month. So this study comes directly out of the 2019 Columbia Pike Commercial Market Study and the resulting guidance from the December 2019 County Board work session where the Columbia Pike Market Study was discussed. During that work session, we heard from economic development consultants, the county manager, and Arlington Economic Development, aka AED, who are also here with us today. At that 2019 work session, 3 key recommendations were discussed, and the second recommendation, increasing use flexibility through zoning and land use recommendations, was identified as the most efficient and the most impactful step to move this work forward and permit a wider range of uses. Many of the uses in the staff recommendations are currently permitted in the existing form-based code ground story use table. However, many of them are permitted via a special exception use permit. While some regional and national operators have been successful in the form-based code developments, staff and county leadership have also heard from small businesses and local operators who have found the use permit requirement as an additional level of uncertainty. In addition to staff's review of the existing form-based code ground story use table, the study also identifies retail equivalent uses via guidance from the 2015 Arlington County Retail Plan. So as this study is the result of Columbia Pike and form-based code specific work, the scope is therefore limited to the commercial and neighborhoods form-based code special revitalization districts. One major relevant regulation here is that the commercial form-based code developments require non-residential uses on the ground story on any main street frontage, so essentially anything fronting Columbia Pike. However, the neighborhoods form-based codes do not require commercial uses, but they do permit commercial uses on the ground story of urban main street frontages. Again, the same, essentially anything fronting Columbia Pike. Our community engagement activities began in February of this year and continued through most of the summer. Additionally, since the RTA, the request to advertise, was adopted by the county board last month, we've continued to share meeting materials, links, and invitations to upcoming meetings. Thus far, we have met with 7 non-county appointed groups and stood up an online feedback opportunity that received 129 responses. Additionally, we visited the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group 3 times, and we will present at the Barcroft School and Civic League meeting later this week. Some key takeaways so far: there is a lot of support to update the form-based code use tables and consider adding new uses. Most do agree that the existing form-based code use table overutilizes use permits and more uses should be by right. And during our initial round of stakeholder interviews, most residents agreed that use permits are overused but are necessary in some cases. We heard the perspective that ground story retail on Columbia Pike experiences a lot of vacancies and turnovers, and that permitting a wider range of uses will create a better ecosystem for retail to thrive. Some commercial stakeholders and a small handful of residents did feel the study scope was too limited and we should depart from the existing use table format and instead create a small list of prohibited uses. However, staff did review this recommendation and found that departing from the use table format would entail a major overhaul in the zoning ordinance and was also not necessary to achieve the study's intent of increasing use flexibility on Columbia Pike. So this is a brief introduction to the recommendations. I will note that each recommendation requires a rather technical approach to amending not only the form-based code, but also the neighborhoods form-based code and multiple articles within the zoning ordinance as displayed in the right column. However, all proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance are directly in service of amending the form-based code use tables. Here we have a high-level overview of all use recommendations that were heard at last month's request to advertise. And tonight we're looking forward to continuing this discussion with you, and we will share how the recommendations have evolved and address a few items that have come up over the past couple of weeks. So the use category of office includes a few different types of office uses, and we're recommending that they all be permitted by right. Currently, animal boarding activities fall in the term kennel in the zoning ordinance and is only permitted in industrial zones. However, we're introducing a more contemporary term, animal boarding, to be permitted by right with the following use standards. All activity conducted inside and 24-hour supervision must be employed. One item we've heard feedback from is about the museum, art galleries, and art studio use type. Throughout most of the county, this use does require a use permit. However, staff's recommendation for this study has always been that museums, art galleries, and art studios be permitted by right instead of via a use permit. To further research a concern we heard, we brought this question to the zoning administrator and other zoning team leaders. Are art studios potentially too similar to a manufacturing artisan workshop? Zoning identified that distinctions exist between a community service use category, which is how museums, art galleries, and art studios are categorized, and an industrial use category, which is how artisan workshops are categorized. While we understand there could be potential similarities, the industrial use category's manufacturing characteristics provide zoning with sufficient characterization to make a distinction. Manufacturing artisan beverage would be a brewery, distillery, or cidery type of an operation. Prior to the RTA, our preliminary recommendation was to permit this use via a use permit, as it is a new use that does not exist in a commercial or mixed-use zone in Arlington, and items such as storage, commercial loading, deliveries, and general customer activity, and the way that all of those items would interface. Those are often really unique based on the operator and may benefit from a site-by-site assessment that comes along with the use permit. There was also a preliminary recommendation of a use permit for manufacturing artisan workshops for very similar reasons. However, in order to give time for more consideration and discussion before a final decision is made, at this month's County Board meeting, we expanded the request to advertise scope and included a by right or use permit option. As you can see in more detail in the staff report, staff currently maintains a preliminary recommendation of use permit for manufacturing artisan uses. Additionally, after more recent discussions late last week between zoning, planning, and AED, we are updating our recommendation by removing a use standard that would not easily be enforceable by zoning staff. And that would be prohibiting the production of offensive noise, vibration, smoke, dust, or other particulate matter. We recommend removing this use standard because of a number of reasons. And first, the determination of offensive is very subjective. There are no measurable units for vibration, smoke, or dust, and therefore zoning enforcement would have no standard to measure. And the county's noise ordinance, which is enforced by ISD, already includes measurable standards that are applicable countywide, and they are not use specific. Manufacturing artisan uses may at times actually produce some vibration, some smoke, dust, and including a vague use standard that could put the operator at risk of being in violation of the ordinance is not something that we want to do and would not promote the flexibility that we are aiming for. So the last two uses are shared commercial kitchens and contemporary urban agriculture uses of hydroponics and the like. The staff recommendation is to permit both uses by right, and the urban agricultural use would have similar use standards as the artisan uses as we continue to promote a Main Street environment and uphold the form-based code's purpose and intent. The last proposed change would allow commercially zoned legacy sites or properties that were constructed prior to the implementation of the form-based code and have not redeveloped using this optional zoning tool to access the form-based code ground story use tables. Permitting legacy sites to access the new use table would ensure a wider range of rent prices for business owners locating along the pike. As we heard in our community engagement sessions with the NOVA Hispanic American Chamber of Commerce and the Arlington branch of the NAACP's Economic Development Working Group, many people of color experience financial barriers when looking to secure a brick and mortar location or to expand their operations. Having a wider range of rent prices on Columbia Pike would provide some relief and may go a long way to not exclude smaller businesses from this opportunity. So before we get into our discussion, staff finds these bullet points to be some of the more relevant items to consider if the manufacturing artisan uses should require a use permit or not. So that would be the novelty of permitting these uses in mixed-use districts, whereas they have traditionally been most commonly found and permitted in industrial districts. There's also the need to analyze and mitigate potential transportation impacts specific to each site associated with customer trip activity and the potential interactions with loading and delivery options, and the potential need to establish site-specific enforceable mitigation strategies for manufacturing-related activities, such as a brewery's boiling process that produces an aroma often likened to creamed corn or yeast. As we wrap up our presentation, I will also highlight that we're still consulting with the county manager's office to finalize a recommendation in time for the county board meeting later this month. Therefore, your input on this consideration would be most helpful as we continue to consider the merits and challenges of the manufacturing artisan uses permission level. While a by right approach would likely provide greater certainty and flexibility for the business, there are also potential trade-offs of reduced county and community discretion in analyzing project-specific conditions. So here we have our timeline. As I mentioned, we started earlier this year and conducted a lot of our community engagement, kind of wrapping the first wave of that up in the summer. We presented to the zoning committee in September. The RTA was adopted in October, and we do look forward to going to the county board later this month. And so therefore, we do recommend that we adopt the proposed zoning amendments to the listed articles. And before I turn it back over to the chair, I will say that we do have a number of planning and economic development staff here for this discussion, and we look forward to hearing your opinions on these items.
Thank you, Ms. Dumas. Very thorough. We do not have any public speakers for this item. Are there any other commissions that would like to speak to this who are present? The Transportation Commission did not take this up. So hearing no commissions. Commissioner Hughes, do you have either a report or some talking points?
Yeah.
Questions for us?
I will try to talk to this item. I know we heard the RTA, and I apologize I don't have a written report from my fellow colleagues. But I do think it's important to note, oh, you get to see my 2-year-old in the background, so I'll try to scoot over here, or my 4-year-old. I do think it's important for everyone here to note that this has been a process going on far longer than Ebony laid out actually on her slides. I mean, I remember the flexibility back from the market, the genesis of the market study. And the whole goal here for all of my fellow commissioners to know is both my neighbors, the business leaders, the business owners all along the pike have pretty much from day one said, what we want is business. What we want is people. What we want is livelihoods. And with that, they want the maximum flexibility possible. And those have been the words that I have heard more than any others from all types of people all across the pike at all levels is the maximum flexibility. That let's be an experiment. Let's try new things. And so staff has really, in their credit, really responded with a very ambitious a change to our zoning ordinance here. And I think nothing's greater to highlight it than the 2 articles today, you know, the definition of kennel that we heard again earlier today with respect to the industrial zoning and the issues surrounding uses, the limitations of your use permit with respect to if you bleed outside of it, how the infringements of those can go. So I think those are the important things for us to have our conversation around. I think we also owe a conversation to staff about the by right versus the use permit, where they've asked us to come back to them on. And I think we can have that one. I know where I fall. I'm not going to tilt windmills either way to tell folks where my opinion is. And I plan to probably remain mostly quiet throughout the whole conversation until we get the motions, and I'll make my motion. So, Commissioner Lantemi, I think the most important things is to talk about any questions that folks have around the flexibilities that are being granted, or any definitional use categories they don't know, for example, kennels. And then the other thing I will say is, for my fellow commissioners, I want to be clear, like, this is the goal here is to promote retail on the pike. And what I mean by that is business activity. The article today made me chuckle a little bit. The poor business owner who's having a zoning issue with respect to the definition of kennels with his the dog boarding place that they're trying to build next to the Whole Foods at Market Common in the next IOTA space for the building I actually chaired years ago. It made me really realize the goal of this for the Pike is to try to bring businesses where we currently are struggling to get businesses, and I don't want us to miss that point. So, Commissioner Lantomi, I'll be quiet now and let folks sort of ask their questions in zones as they want. But the big things is we owe staff a conversation on whether by right or use permit is the most appropriate with the new zoning definitions categories that they've requested, and yeah, any questions they have with respect to definitions and flexibilities. And Ebony, did I miss anything? Looking over there in my corner, she'll give me a head nod or a thumbs down. Oh, she gave me
Great
two thumbs
job
up.
as always. Thank you.
Oh, I succeeded today. Commissioner Lantomi.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Hughes. Yes, I'll certainly open it up to the floor. I have a couple of my own questions, but first, let me hear from many of the fellow commissioners. Commissioner Schroll and then Commissioner Peterson. Mr. Schroll, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Dumas, thank you for your presentation and your work on this project. I concur with my colleague, Commissioner Hughes. I think this is a good effort. Just have some clarifying questions for you. So you mentioned that there's some edits to the manufacturing requirements, and you kind of showed that on your slide. I just want to clarify, is glare still a requirement? Or
No, so that whole B, we're recommending that we just remove that whole B sub bullet point.
Great. Okay, thank you. And then in the staff report, so I'm on page 38 of 46. Let me know when you're there.
Okay.
Great. So under manufacturing, artisan beverage, under number one, C1 there, you have the characteristics, and you list out a number of things, including kind of fermenting and distilling and, wine and cider. When you get to C2, it just includes 3 examples, so breweries, distilleries, wineries. I was wondering if you could speak to maybe why cideries, meaderies were not included in that, if that was intentional, or if, because I think in your comments, you did reference, I think, cideries, and I was just wondering.
Sure. So this, the characteristics that generally has come from a survey of regional and national best practices on regulating this use. When we looked at the examples, we looked at the uses that were most common regionally, and so those uses are called out. However, should a cidery, go to the go to zoning, they are still included under the characteristics, and therefore the list of examples under C2, as you mentioned, that's not an exclusive list.
Okay.
But we could also, if there are, specific examples that, you think should be added, we're definitely happy to look at that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly know of, cideries and meaderies in the general area. And so, I don't know of any in development that are trying to locate in Arlington, but, there are cideries, at least in the broader area. There's certainly a meadery in Baltimore called Charm City. But I mean, as an old planning commissioner previous planning commissioner used to say, her phrase was kind of belt and suspenders. And so I think if we want somebody to, if we want to encourage this, and it's within the bounds of the RTA, or we're not kind of, going outside of the bounds of that, I think it would be useful to maybe include meaderies and cideries there, if that's the intention.
Absolutely.
In C2. Sure. My last question, Ms. Dumas, is just around, at this stage, what's the discussion of, if you had a manufacturing artisan beverage, a brewery coming in, and in the staff report, it mentions some of the concern around the kind of aroma during the wort boil and things like that. I'm wondering what kind of discussions around mitigation, what does that need to look like? because some of these things are sort of inherent in the process. And so you're going to get, it's going to smell like malt every day during brew time. And so I'm just wondering what the discussion has been, maybe from the staff side, or what you're kind of hearing from folks along the pike.
Sure. I'd say one item that helps frame that discussion is, we are also proposing legacy sites. And so while we are, looking at a new form-based code development that would have, really the most up-to-date exhaust system and would be, up to 6 stories very likely, and expel that exhaust, above and beyond really any other residential or other windows. We do understand that, for example, there are multiple 1-story legacy sites where that smell might be, come through the 1st story and then go to a neighboring, residential unit that shares an alley or is directly behind that 1-story legacy site. And so for us, that was part of the kind of inclination to go toward use permit. So that's just one item. When we were in discussion with zoning, something that they've brought up as that led to our removing that B that we were discussing earlier, the prohibited prohibited items. What they were suggesting was like there is a possibility when going through a use permit process to include specific standards for the exhaust system that wouldn't be necessarily we're not able to tell or make a tailored use standard that would apply to every single form-based code development equally and every single existing legacy site. That would mitigate those items. I would even ask if any of my colleagues wanted to jump in on that one. I think those are some of the kind of main items that we've been discussing recently.
I don't see anybody else jumping.
Commissioner,
yeah, Commissioner Hughes, go ahead.
Thanks,
you want to
Commissioner
help clarify on this?
I think I first want to thank staff, because I think they may be responding to the only heartache, the only heartburn that I really have with this entire zoning ordinance is I won't call it late addition, because it wasn't a late addition. It was a addition of the legacy sites. The legacy sites were added, Ebony, correct me if I'm wrong, over the summer. I think is when we first added those. And I think Ebony did a great job of outlining. I have no concern about any of these zoning categories in the new buildings that are being built. All of them come in 6 stories. They have all the latest and greatest technologies. They have set up in the zoning ordinance neighborhood manners with respect to setbacks that we've all talked about time and time before. The tapering that goes on, exactly how it does, the approaches to the single family. Our goal as commissioners is to push our community, but our goal as commissioners is also to protect the whole community from itself. In other words, not to have one project kill all development everywhere for its bad sins. And that has been my only concern with any of these zoning category uses being done on the existing sites, which is that we don't want one bad actor in one bad situation to poison the well across the entire community. And so that has been my own things. And I think Commissioner Stroll, you're right. If you have a brewery, it's going to smell like beer. I mean, it's good or bad. I mean, it all depends on preferences. And sometimes it's wonderful and some people find it horrible. I mean, we can't control that. But what we can control is how we approach it. And so I probably will move for the use permit for my fellow commissioners, for everyone to know, for this primary purpose. I am a believer that we need to be as experimental. I'm huge on that, but I'm also very cautious with respect to the existing facilities, buildings, and these new categories of uses being used within them. That one bad actor in one spot doesn't ruin the great idea across the whole spectrum. And so I appreciate Ebony going after it. This great explanation here, and Commissioner Stroll, your comment was on point there. And belts and suspenders, man, that's just great. I'm going to have to use it more often again.
Thank you both. And Yeah, I just want to make sure as this is implemented, I'm certainly supportive of it. And as we get into this and we see some of these applications hopefully come through, perhaps when I'm off the commission, that that there's an understanding that there might be some smell with a brewery or some smell with a distillery. And I think as you use in the draft, it's, you know, something that's noxious, right? It needs to sort of get across a level where it's something that really is something that's disturbing. But I think I've made my point. Thank you so much for your work. And Mr. Chairman, I certainly thank you for the opportunity and yield back.
Thank you, Commissioner Stroll and Commissioner Hughes for that. Commissioner Peterson?
Thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Dumas. I really enjoyed it, and I appreciate the efforts that you're going to support this neighborhood, and I completely support the efforts to work with small businesses. So I had a clarifying question, which was that the online feedback form that you got responses on, we're asking people whether or not they want to make changes, not whether they like these proposed changes. Is that right?
That was I think those were the kind of introduction questions. We did list all of the uses that we are discussing, except urban agricultural uses. That was a recent addition, and so that was not on the online feedback form. And so we asked if it wasn't a required question, but we did give people the opportunity to kind of rank those. I think maybe 8 or 9 uses in the order that they felt adhered the most to the form-based code purpose and intent.
Okay. And was there feedback on the animal boarding section? I could imagine if there are areas that may be adjacent to where people are living that, like, you know, boarding 24 hours, there might be dogs barking all night, and that could impact quality of life for people who would be adjacent to those facilities. So I was looking at the map and I couldn't quite tell if there might be residential apartment buildings that would be next to possible spots for animal boarding.
Sure. And so I guess another kind of tenet of what the form-based code produces is usually between 3 to 6 stories of mixed use. And so, you know, commercial on the ground story and then 5 stories of residential units is usually what we see in a commercial form-based code development. And so, you know, also in a recent kind of like walk and drive along Columbia Pike, noting where there are legacy sites adjacent to, you know, existing residential. It's not often, but it does happen. And so when we are looking at, you know, the form-based code developments, there will definitely be residents who are above. I, you know, think in one way, some discussions that we've had, especially that AED has been in leading. And so if either of them want to jump in, I would welcome them as well. But we understand that for a property management company to be able to, you know, rent out their units, there has to be mitigation and those sound concerns taken into account. What we also found was that it is very common practice. We spoke to 3 operators of animal boarding uses. And so I think 2 of them currently are one of them is definitely in Alexandria, one is national. I forget the other operator, but we talked through some of these operational issues with the operator. And so the use standard of 24-hour supervision, that is very common. And so I'd say one item there that, you know, was in discussion at the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group was with 24-hour supervision, is that always, you know, a human being who is employed there on site, or can it also be video surveillance? What we have learned from the operators and some, you know, trades organization is that it is common for video surveillance to be part of, honestly, what it attracts pet owners to a location. And so they're always able to see what their pet is doing when they're, you know, traveling, when they're leaving their dogs for a couple of days. And so we also know that, 24-hour supervision and completely conducted inside. That was another major item that is a very common practice. And we learned that taking the animals outside, whether it's for air or for a walk, was actually seen as a big liability, additional liability for the operator. And so there are a lot of, generally a lot of like multi-purpose rooms inside of these buildings where they're able to do trainings, they're doing drills, they're getting exercise, but it's always conducted inside. And so I do believe that the use standards that we have, they have been vetted by multiple animal boarding operators and seem to be in line with, also are in line with the form-based code's purpose and intent.
Okay, thank you. And then likewise, just thinking about neighbors trying to sleep at different times of day, will there be any guidelines for the shared kitchens and artisan beverage manufacturing about like times of day that you can be noisy? I can imagine if there was like a shared kitchen for a bakery, they might be up at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning working. And so while, of course, I love some fresh baked bread, maybe if I was living directly next door and suddenly the trucks start coming to bring deliveries, that might be frustrating. So is there any kind of guidelines there, or is that something that we're just accepting because it'll bring some nice revitalization to the street?
Sure, and that's definitely something that we're constantly trying to balance and, regularly asking for feedback on. What we have found is incorporating hours of operation into the zoning ordinance is very tricky. And so I'll actually bring in one of my colleagues to discuss this a little bit more detail.
Hi there, Commissioner Peterson, Nick Rogers. Good evening. So good to be here with you tonight. We really, it's obviously it's very common when an applicant is going through our discretionary process, either the use permit or the site plan, for us to really have a community conversation about their business practices and the hours of operations to identify those, because just as you've just alluded to, it can be different based on the operator, based on their scale, based on their regional distribution and what have you. And so whereas those conversations are easier and can and should be had on a within that realm by imposing some sort of blanket hours of operation in the zoning ordinance, making it regulatory across all operators is not considered a best practice. And so we weighed that factor in our decision to recommend for the use permit for the breweries and distilleries and the workshops. And given our research with the shared commercial kitchens, we did not have that concern, and that does weigh into some of that balance that Ms. Dumas has talked about with wanting that flexibility, but being okay with some of the vibrancy that comes with a mixed use environment.
Great, I appreciate your response, and I will be supporting this this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Commissioner Hughes, your hand is up.
I just wanted to respond to Commissioner Peterson's very eloquent description of what can be the challenge with the use categories, and I just wanted to make clear that from what I have heard from my neighbors, the support, flexibility, and the promotion of retail overcomes most of those concerns, especially with respect to the new buildings, the new form-based code buildings, the buildings that have been delivered so far. And for example, they have the loading docks that are designed for sound mitigation in the sense of how they're designed and operated. And so it just further confirms to me, Commissioner Peterson, my own single reservation in this entire application, which is the inclusion of the legacy sites, which I'm willing to overlook for various reasons and willing to experiment with, as my neighbors have implored me. But I do think you've shown everyone why these are light industrial uses that we're trying to experiment to see how far out we can use them. And Commissioner Peterson, you absolutely laid it out. Maybe the dogs bark all night. Maybe the delivery van for the bagels arrives at 3 a.m. to take it to all the hotels everywhere. These are things that can happen, but I do think, especially in our big new form-based code delivered buildings, the buildings are designed with the facilities to handle those things. So I'll quiet. Thank you, Commissioner Lantomi.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. I actually have a couple of questions and comments. So first off, thank you for removing from the proposed ordinance the enforcing the noxious uses essentially. When I first looked at that before you had taken it out, my lawyer instincts went up and went, whoa, wait a minute, how can you possibly enforce this? This is too loosey-goosey. And I'm glad that you did see that and removed it. I wholeheartedly support that. It just would open a can of worms and just wouldn't work. It wasn't workable. So I agree with you on that. As far as the uses go, there's a lot of uses that are analogous now that are allowed. The deliveries could happen at 3 a.m. for even a 7-Eleven. So, and those are already allowed. So we already have these sort of potential annoyances from the retail that exists now. And I'm not sure that these new uses really are of a difference in kind or even degree. I think that they have their risks, of course, but I think they're something are reasonable and can live with. Certainly, the odors from a potential brewery, cidery, whatever, can be an issue, but we have them right now. Clarendon has a small brewery that every time, once in a while when I go by it, I can smell the brew going on. And yeah, it's a noticeable smell. And I can understand how some people would not like it and others think it's the nectar of the gods type of odor, but it exists now and we are able to deal with it in our metro corridors. So, and we of course had one down in Arlington for quite a long time. So I think it is something that is manageable. I would tend to want to do things by right rather than wherever we can, rather than by use permit, if only because we're trying to encourage smaller businesses, and the regulatory hoops to go through for a use permit are not inconsiderable. And when you have limited capital to start a business going, you're going to be expending it on getting through the process. So from simply an economic development point of view and trying to get small and encourage small businesses, which do contribute to the vitality of the neighborhood. And it is the type of thing we do like to see. If wherever we can do it by right, I think that would be the best way to go. And yeah, there will be some that turn out to be that don't work, but I'd rather have those few that don't work and go back and revisit those than try to loosen all of them up later, because it turns out that we really always let them go through. They're never a problem. So I'd rather do it. I'd rather have them ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. But that's my own bent on this. My question is on the kennels. We have been seeing a little bit of letter writing on that, and the potential for unintended consequences to existing kennels. Have you considered that? Has it been thought through? Is there any resolution, or is that something that someone's raising a concern that really doesn't exist?
So yes, thank you for that. We have, seen the article that was referenced earlier, and also, an email that came in recently as well. And we've actually been in touch with the county attorney's office and with the zoning administrator. And I'll let my colleague Nick Rogers give a little bit more detail on what has come out of those discussions.
Mr. Chair, I really appreciate you bringing this up. I know this was a matter of written comments that you and your colleagues received, and quite frankly, and Ms. Dumas covered this in the staff report, how we heard from other stakeholders, both from more of the countywide groups as well as those specific on Columbia Pike, really advocating for this type of business, which for as we imagine, we do think is appropriate for Columbia Pike and is successful. There is a matter of scoping, of course, with this study. Ebony's taken great length to give you the background in the history on how this study is tailored to those goals and objectives of the walkable Main Street environment for Columbia Pike, optimizing that retail market and doing something special and innovative for Columbia Pike. That's baked into the study. Some of the comments and the speculation and questions on, well, what's good for Columbia Pike? Is it good for the rest of the county? It is not. There have been some initial conversations on that. We anticipated that those types of questions would come out from yourselves and other members of the community. And as I'll bring you back to about 60 days or so ago, Mr. Fusarelli presented a very ambitious agenda for this fiscal year and beyond. And so there are work plan implications for us getting through this study to consider other things. And as he mentioned, we have a lot of things on tap this year related to Housing Arlington and other key economic resiliency initiatives. So appreciate the feedback, appreciate the commentary about, could this be a permitted use that's appropriate in other parts of the county. We're staying within our scope on the study at this time for this particular use.
I was on mute. Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions or comments? Mr. Hughes, Commissioner Hughes, your hand is up. That was Nara. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Commissioner Hughes, do you have a motion for us?
I do. Before I make the motion, I would just want to have a clarification from staff. The seeking of comment, because I'll make my fellow commissioners make a vote. That way we can actually get information to the board. That's our job. Is it limited just to the manufacturing artisan district for beverages, or do you want it for both categories, both artisan manufacturing districts? And do you need it separated or the same?
So it's I would ask for both.
Understood.
I do think that, especially as they are both manufacturing uses that we are introducing, that we have a tendency to want to keep them together and regulate them the same. And so if there's any thoughts on that as well, that might be helpful.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And with that, for my fellow commissioners, what I will do first is I intend to move the staff recommendation. Subsequent to the following of the staff recommendation, I will first move unanimous consent to include, as Commissioner Scholl laid out, meaderies and cideries for belts and suspenders in honor of Commissioner Giacomini. I know Mr. Moss will probably proceed with that anyways, but just for good old belts and suspenders call out. And then afterwards, I will move to open the discussion about whether it should be by right or with a use permit with regulating principles by moving to adopt a recommendation for the use permit. So I just want to lay that out before I begin reading the plan ahead. Mr. Chair, any comments before I move, or are we all good?
All good.
All right. Let me get my thing up and we'll go. I move that the Planning Commission recommend the County Board adopt the attached ordinance to amend, reenact, and recodify the Arlington County Zoning Ordinance, Articles 7, 8, 11, 12, and 18, along with Section 3 and 6 of Appendix A and Part 9 of Appendix B to permit a wider range of residential uses within the Columbia Pike Special Revitalization District and the Columbia Pike Neighborhood Special Revitalization District as designated on the General Land Use Plan. Staff report dated October 27th, 2021.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Schroll, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Scholl. Thank you, Commissioner Lantomi. I would like to seek unanimous consent to recommend that page 38C2 include both meaderies and cideries.
Hearing no objection, it's passed.
Thank you, Commissioner Lantomi. Now let me make a motion here. I have to get the next one up. Sorry, everyone. Got a flight between all the different tabs. This is much easier when we had like pencils in front of us, I feel like, in some ways. I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the Manufacturing Artisan Beverage District and the Manufacturing Artisan Workshop use categories be moved with use standards and a use permit as the method for approval.
Do we have a second for that?
Hearing none, the motion has failed, so I'll make that separate motion. I move that the Manufacturing Artisan Beverage District and the Manufacturing Artisan Workshop District use categories be allowed by right.
Do we have a second on that? Who was that? Was that Commissioner Weir?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That was seconded. Okay. Very good. Okay.
We got to call that one first.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I moved it, so I will support it. I do want the record to show that my one concern remains, and I will support it because I have heard time and time again from the community to let it be an experiment, to let it do. And Commissioner Lantomi, you are correct in the sense of if we let it be stricter, it's going to be a whole lot harder to make it more loose by right later on than it is to rein it back from by right down to use categories. And so I can see the argument here, but I will say I do hope that as it moves forward, that the community understands that this is a little bit of an experiment, and I think that I can support that.
Okay. Do we have any other discussion on this? Okay, hearing none, I think we'll take a vote on the first motion. Are we ready for the vote? Commissioner Weir.
Aye.
Commissioner Schroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes.
Aye.
Commissioner Gearing.
Aye.
Commissioner Morton.
Aye.
Commissioner Steinberger.
Aye.
Commissioner Patel.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson.
Aye.
Commissioner Bagley.
Aye.
Commissioner Sarli.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. The motion passes unanimously. For a second motion on having it the breweries by right, the vote on that is Commissioner Weir.
Aye.
Commissioner Schroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes.
Aye.
Commissioner Gearing.
Aye.
Commissioner Morton.
Aye.
Commissioner Steinberger.
Aye.
Commissioner Patel.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson.
Aye.
Commissioner Bagley.
Aye.
Commissioner Sarli.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Commissioner Hughes, for shepherding this. And thank you, Ms. Dumas and Mr. Rogers, for your excellent presentations and your answers to our questions.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
You too. Okay, time for us to move on now to, we do have the minutes. First, let me just get the minutes out of the way. We have our minutes from our October meeting to approve. Do we have any corrections or comments to those?
I do. This is Commissioner Steinberger. I do have an edit to that.
Okay.
And apologies, I did not have a chance to review ahead of time. But in the update in the notes regarding the PFRC, it says that a meeting will be held on September 29th. I believe that should say was held.
Thank you. Will Ms. Johnson note that change? And I will then, so any other edits?
Commissioner Lantomi, I would seek to note that in the form-based code report, it was not late 22, but Q2 of 22, which I'll correct in our next report. But to make the record straight from the last meeting, it was Q1 or Q2, not late 2022.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Hughes.
In that same PFRC section, the last sentence should also be was the final meeting for this project. Basically, anything that says like future tense should be past tense.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. We can make those changes. Ms. Johnson has noted those. I will then move to approve the minutes from our Planning Commission's October meeting, subject to the edits that were mentioned this evening. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. That was Commissioner Hughes.
Yes.
Okay, take the vote. Commissioner Weir.
Aye.
Commissioner Schroll.
Abstain.
Commissioner Hughes.
Aye.
Commissioner Guerin.
Aye.
Commissioner Morton.
Aye.
Commissioner Steinberger.
Aye.
Commissioner Patel.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson.
Aye.
Commissioner Bagley.
Aye.
Commissioner Sarli.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you very much. Can we now have the staff report on current matters? Mr. Pfeiffer, do you have anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We actually have nothing tonight. Thank you very much.
Okay, that makes things easy. Now we'll hear the reports from our subcommittees. Commissioner Morton, SBRC.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since we met last, we had 2 walking tours. It was nice to see some of my colleagues in person, finally. On October 18th, the Marbella Apartments redevelopment, and on October 28th, the Penn Place project. We are in the midst of the online engagement right now for the Penn Place project, which goes till November 7th. Later this month, we have 2 projects that are getting their second virtual SPRC meeting. The Wendy's project meeting will be November 18th, and the Marbella Apartments on November 22nd. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. And I want to note those walking tours were great. I was stunned at the turnout for the Penn Place, though I suppose I shouldn't have been too surprised, but it was the largest turnout by order of magnitude I think we've ever had for a walking tour. So yeah, it's great to have them back in person. The LRPC, Commissioners Schroll and or Guerin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pretty brief report. So that we had a busy October. So thanks for everybody who participated in all the meetings we had and the online engagements. So thanks to all my fellow commissioners. In November, though, we are kind of slowing down a little bit, taking a little respite. There will be an upcoming meeting on the Clarendon sector plan process update. Staff is still kind of thinking through what day it may be. So please hold these days for now. So September 17th, next week. Sorry, November 17th. Sorry, good catch, Mr. Chairman. So November 17th, or it might be held on Tuesday, November 23rd. And I know that that's Thanksgiving week, so we are, I think, trying to push for an earlier time slot, but it will be one of those 2 days. And I don't believe we have anything else, but you, Commissioner Guerin, please let me know if we do on the on any of the other long-range planning things that you were working on with Commissioner Sarli.
Okay, nothing there. Thank you, Commissioner Schroll. Yes, it was a very, very busy month for LRPC. Zoko.
So had a joint meeting with LRPC on October 18th on the Pentagon City.
Commissioner Patel, your sound is going out.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've got a sleeping child next to me. So I would just say there's nothing to report at this time. We had a joint meeting with LRPC on October 18th on the Pentagon City PDFB. But as of right now, we don't have any new updates.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Steinberger, PFRC.
Thank you. So we've not had another in-person, or sorry, meeting period since our last meeting. It looks like the Career Center project will be starting back up at some point. So I expect to have many PFRC meetings on that at some point, to be determined. And things are still, some loose ends are still getting tied up with the Arlington bus project in terms of signage locations and the like. I'm hoping to have some insight on that before it comes to the commission down the line. So thank you.
I do have one question for you. You may not know anything yet. Now that the announcement's been made to have the Arlington Community High School at Penn Place, will that be part of the SPRC, or will it have a separate PFRC for that?
You are not the first person to ask me that question. I do not know the answer. I had expected it would be part of the SPRC process because no one told me otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
If I may interject,
yes, please do.
This is Tenley. I'm running the SPRC for Penn Place. It will be part of the SPRC, and because it's a larger project, we are ready and prepared to have an extra meeting just to focus on that topic. But at present, we're going to have it be part of the initial meetings, and then we'll see more conversations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Tenley, if that's something that the PFRC or otherwise can assist with, or if you'd like to coordinate in any regard, please let me know. Happy to have that conversation.
Okay, I'll reach out to you.
Thanks.
Thank you both. Commissioner Hughes, anything from the Form-Based Code Advisory Committee?
Yes, Commissioner Lantomi. As I said, staff surprised me and I was in error. In the next 3 months, I expect the use permit will come forward for us to review, and the Planning Commission, which is the other half of the Penrose Plaza project, which covers the area from Penrose north almost to Walter Reed, not including the historically significant Art Deco building at the corner, just to not get anyone to send me hate mail. And we heard it this past month at Form-Based Code a week ago. So, and was positively reviewed. So look forward to going to the commission.
And for the Pentagon City PDSP report, we have the draft is out. We had a community comment period, which closed at midnight last night. We've gotten quite a number of comments in. Those are now being collated so that we can get a report on those. As Commissioner Schroll, as Commissioner Patel mentioned, we had a joint ZOCO LRPC meeting on the 18th, which went very well, and actually, to my surprise, ended on a little bit early. So the whole process is moving forward, and we do expect that it will be before the Planning Commission at the upcoming December meeting. So that's pretty much the report for there. Before we adjourn, actually, I do want to report about an email that I got from Krister All. You may not, those of you who know him, he is the chair of the Crystal City Citizens Review Council. He has announced his resignation retirement from the CCCRC. He is apparently going to be moving out of Arlington. I believe all of us have had the pleasure of working with Krister on many projects that we've reviewed within Crystal City and Pentagon City. His observations and comments have always been constructive and welcome, and his commitment to making Arlington a better place to live and work has been evident throughout the years. He was the prime mover behind the creation of the CCCRC in 2010 and has been active as its representative at many of our SPRCs, LRPC, and ZOCO meetings that involve that area. His thoughtful critiques and observations will be missed. Thank you, Krister, if you're listening. You will be missed. Moving on, as I mentioned, there will not be a recess meeting this month. We are done with our business for this month, and I want to go ahead and thank staff, applicants, and members of the public for your time and consideration and patience this evening. The items heard this evening are expected to go to the county board on November 13th and or the 16th. Planning Commissioner Patel is scheduled to represent the Planning Commission at these county board hearings. Many staff have labored to make this virtual meeting run smoothly, and thanks to all of you, with a special thanks to our clerk, Giselle Johnson, to Ms. Joanne Harrison, and to SBRC Supervisor Matt Pfeiffer, to our technical guru, David Wood, and to others who've made this meeting possible. With that, I declare this meeting adjourned. We're done. Thank you all, and see you next month, which I think will actually be November 30th for a December meeting. The first of our meetings. We will, warning now, we definitely will be having 2 meetings, one meeting and a recess meeting, and we could very well have a third. We have a very heavy schedule coming up, or very heavy agenda, it looks like, coming up for our upcoming December meeting. So you're warned ahead of time. Thank you very much. Good evening, all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Good night.